Had several things that I thought about and prayed about, and one of them I haven't taught on. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't taught on giving. There's not a problem with giving as far as I'm concerned in this church, and it's just I haven't taught on it in a long time. I haven't preached on it as far as I know. And you say, well, you mention it an awful lot. No? Can you remember the last time I preached on giving? Can anybody? I looked it up, and it was 5 years ago that I had a message on giving. I've only got like 3 messages on giving. And one of the things is we don't pass a plate here. And I followed that example after my pastor, Brother Eastep. And I thought it best because rarely do we ever even mention giving, except maybe in the message somehow. Like I think I was talking about the 2 thresholds, and one of them was a performance, and of course the text was about giving. So I mentioned it then, but the last thing I want is for somebody to come in this church and think this is all about money, because it's not. I can make a living without being a pastor. I've done it before, and I could do it again, Lord willing. But when people come in here, and I mean all my life I saw this, where people come to churches, next thing you know, first order of business is take up an offering. And Pastor Eastep didn't think it was necessary for Charity Baptist Church, and it wasn't, and I don't think it's necessary for Philadelphia Baptist Church. We do just fine. I don't need the money of the lost to do God's business. God's not asking the lost to contribute to His business. He asks His children to contribute to His business. So that's the way we've done it. It works pretty well. I don't think we have ever passed a plate at Philadelphia Baptist Church. I think one time we passed a cup after the service. We was taking up, somebody showed up the service and needed a hand, and I thought we'd take up about, $20 for them or something to help them out. We took up $105. I mean, I don't know what he did with it. I hope he did right with it. Said he was going to do right with it. Yes, sir.
All the years that we didn't take up an offering, we never got fined on the bill.
Right, and the same is true here. I have never missed a paycheck, not one. Now I've seen situations where it came awful close, but before I ever take a paycheck, the bills of this church will be paid, because we're not going to have a bad testimony. But you know what? God's always been faithful. God's people have always been faithful. So I'm not trying to beat anybody over the head. This is more about why it's important to give, and next week I might get into some principles of giving. But what we're going to talk about here is the importance of giving. Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 8. I'm glad that I haven't had to beg for money. I probably wouldn't do it anyway. I don't know what I did with a pen somewhere around here. There it is. But I know there are a lot of preachers that have had to. They've had bake sales and rummage sales and dunk the preacher. And I know there's probably a few people in here who like to dunk the preacher and, dunk it in a bucket 2 times, take it out once, that kind of thing. Carnivals, watch the preacher swallow a goldfish, and if I could just find where Jesus did it one time, I'd do it. I put a dunking machine. We'd have Carnival Day. We'd have a bouncy house. They had one in here, by the way. They even took down some of these lights to get a bouncy house in here. We'd do it if I could just find it. I just haven't found it. I can't find the gimmick, man. If I could find the gimmick, I'll do it. But until I find one, Jesus has got up and just opened the book and began to preach and then sat down. That's what I do. I get up here, open the book, preach, and then sit down. I'm just following the example. That's what Paul did. I don't see any other way. Preachers, maybe I'm not going to criticize. They can do whatever they want, but that's not the way we do it here. In 2 Corinthians 8:7, it says, "Therefore, as ye abound in everything, in faith and utterance and knowledge, and in all diligence and in your love to us, see that ye abound in this grace also. And the grace he's talking about is the grace of giving. It is a grace. It is not a law. It is not, you don't come in here and, you're under the law of tithing. I do not teach that. I do not believe that. Do I think it's important that you learn to give? Absolutely. I don't think you can mature as a Christian without learning how to give. I don't think you can be like your Savior and not learn how to give. There comes a time, I know sometimes when they come in, they're takers. We understand that. And we're willing to give. But if I can't make a giver out of you, I failed you. I'm telling you, I failed you. For God so loved the world, he gave. So let's talk about the importance of it. And the reason it's important is because it's just more than throwing your money into a box or a plate or for missions or just taking it out of your wallet and putting it in there or writing a check. You think it's so simple, but there's really a lot behind it according to the scriptures. And one of the first things is, look at Hebrews chapter 7. The fact that you do it proclaims a truth that you believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Hebrews chapter 7, verse 6 to 8. It says, but he whose descent is not counted from them received tithes of Abraham. And he's talking about Melchizedek. He wasn't of the Levitical tribe, not of that descent, yet he received tithes. And it said, and blessed him that had the promises. Of course, that's Abraham's got the promises. And without all contradiction, the less is blessed of the better. And as Moses was blessed more, why? It's more blessed to give than to receive. There it is. It says, and here men that die receive tithes. Talk about the Levitical priesthood, because those priests die. But there he receiveth them of whom it is witnessed that he liveth. I don't think I'm going to waste my time giving money to a dead man. I just wouldn't do it. But if he rose from the dead, well, that's worth some money right there. So when you tithe, and I call it the tithe, I'm just going to call it a tithe, okay? When I'm talking about giving, tithing, we'll call it that. There's a reason why it's called the tithe, but and we'll talk about that later on. But when you tithe, it testifies to your faith in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I mean, one of the things that this country, and I think the liberals and even the Democrats, they salivate, even some Republicans salivate over the possibility of being able to tax that tithe. Because the money that's given to Jesus Christ in one Sunday, it was staggering. Because it testifieth that he liveth. People believe in him. They believe in him enough to give their money toward him. And usually people don't give money toward something they don't believe in. So when you tithe, it testifies of that. What you give to shows what you have faith in. And that's always going to be true. So first of all, it proclaims the truth of the resurrection. Look at Malachi chapter 3. I know many a preacher that has laid this on his congregation, man, and I mean, it's a rough passage. But the fact of the matter is that you are not ever robbing God. You are just robbing yourself. That's true. You're not robbing God because you're not under the law and you're not under the tithe, but you are robbing yourself. He said in Malachi chapter 3, verse 7 to 10, even from the days of your fathers ye are gone away from mine ordinances and have not kept them. Return unto me, and I'll return unto you, saith the Lord of hosts. But ye said, wherein shall we return? Well, what do we got to do to get right? He goes, well, will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me. But ye say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. Ye are cursed with a curse. Man, you put that on a congregation, boy, you just make it, put a hurt, you're cursed. Well, I'm not going to say you're not cursed, you're just not blessed. You're cursed with a curse. You have robbed me, even this whole nation. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse. There's where we get the thing called storehouse tithing. They actually had a storehouse. They stored the animals. They stored the loot. They stored whatever came in. They had chambers within the temple area to store this stuff. That's why he said, bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house. Got to remember, you're feeding a lot of people in the Levitical priesthood. You've got all those priests that are making the sacrifices. You got those that carry all the furniture around and take care of the showbread and the lighting the candles, or the candlestick, making sure there's plenty of olive oil, all the things that are involved in cutting the wood, everything. Well, those people had to be fed. The Bible says that a preacher's to live of the gospel. They're living of their gospel. And the Lord's providing for them. He says that there may be meat in mine house. Well, God doesn't need it, but somebody else does. And now this is the part you need to get, because we're talking about sacrificial giving. And prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. I like that passage. He says, prove me now herewith. And I'll tell you what, learning how to get, I'll bet you the one thing that I had the worst problem with when I got saved was giving. Hard work is hard work. You work hard for your pay and everything. Then all of a sudden somebody tells you, well, you need to give some of that to God. They used to say, you need to give a tenth of that to God. Huh? I mean, you're just like, what? I'm figuring it up, Man, that's a whole $20. I mean, at the time, I wasn't making much money, And I really had a problem with it. I searched the scriptures, I'm not under the law, But I missed the whole point of the thing that if I'll just give sacrificially, if I'll just give the way God leads me to give, I'll try Him. Try Him out. That's what He says. He said, prove me. He says, you don't think I can't pour you out a blessing? I've been proving Him now, I don't know how long, 30, 40 years, I've been proving Him. He's never let me down. You can tell I ain't gone without any meals. All my bills are paid. Now, I still owe a mortgage, and every now and then, well, I don't think we ever carry a balance on credit cards. That's just thievery. But, I still got a mortgage to pay, and there's a few bills out there we still got. But God, we've always made the payment. God's always met the need. Now, He hasn't always met the want. I can remember times. I can remember a couple years there. I mean, I can't tell you why. I'm not a spendthrift. In fact, I'm about as stingy as they get. But I couldn't afford to go to McDonald's. I'm being honest with you. I couldn't afford to go to McDonald's. But I was still tithing. I was still giving. Because to me, it's not even a question now. You say, well, if all we had was enough just to give the church what we normally give them and there's nothing left, that's what we do. That's what we do. You say, would you sweat it out? I'd probably sweat a little bit. But I'm going to prove Him. You don't think I'm going to go to God and I'm going to read that verse in His very ears? He said, prove me. I've yet to ever have Him fail me. As a matter of fact, God has given so much to me. I don't know. I feel like I'm spoiled. He's been very good to me. Now, I'm not rich, but He's been very good to me. Because He's always met the need. And learning to give is learning to prove God. That's why it's important you do it. If not for that reason alone. Not just testifying of the resurrection, but to prove that God can come through. There's something that bugs me about, I don't like to go to the world for anything. I pray to God there's no pride involved there, because I don't think there is. It's just, I feel like, why would I go to this world and ask them for anything when my God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills and sits in heaven? Why do I need to ask them for anything? So I've just asked the Lord, said, whatever happens, Lord, just don't make me go to them. I don't want to go to them. I'll do without, I'll suffer need, but I don't want to go to them. I've never had to yet. I've paid my taxes. I probably have a right. I probably have a right to some welfare, but I've never asked for it. And I'll tell you what, they'll have to pry it out of my lips before I ask for it. That's just me. Now, maybe it's different for other folks, and different folks have different needs, and I understand that. But to me, why am I asking them for anything? I got a God in heaven that made the heaven and the earth, owns everything. I'll ask him first. At least ask him first. Before you go looking around, before you go asking folks, ask God first. He's the one that's got all the money. Ask him. Prove him. You know what? If you've been faithful in giving, I'll bet you have the same testimony I have. God always meets the need. You're never going to know how God's going to provide unless you step out by faith. Philippians 4, verse 18 and 19, he said, "But I have all and abound, and I am full, having received of Epaphroditus the things which were sent from you." He said, "An odor of sweet smell." This is where they're meeting Paul's need. A sacrifice acceptable, well-pleasing to God. God likes that. When you talk about a sacrifice acceptable, there's never been a greater one than Jesus Christ. And God appreciates that in the fact that it's a sacrifice. So God is God's going to bless the Philippians for their giving. And by the way, it says they gave out of their poverty. They didn't give out of their abundance. They gave out of their poverty, like the widow gave out of her poverty. We're going to see that. We're going to see there's really an inequity in the tithe when it comes to the rich and the poor. It never said that the widow gave a tenth. She gave it all her living. Think of it this way. Let's say we have an individual in here that makes $100 a week. Well, that's starvation wages right there. But $100 a week, and then we got one that makes $10,000 a week. Okay? This person gives $10, this person gives $10,000. Or what did I say, $10,000? $1,000. This one gives $10. Which is greater? Percentage-wise, they're the same. How much is a loaf of bread? $2? Is it cheaper for the guy that makes 100 than it is for the guy that makes 10,000? Same price. He gave more of his living. He gave out of his abundance. That's exactly what Jesus taught. He said she gave all her living. They gave out of their abundance. A little easier to do that. And I'm not saying, you say, well, large offering. Yes, but in God's eyes, largest offering right there. That's how he's engaging the thing. He looks at the heart. He looks at the sacrifice. So it proclaims the truth of the resurrection. It puts God to the test in your life. Oh, I didn't read the rest of the verse in Philippians. He said, but I have all and abound, and I am full, having received of Epaphroditus the things which are sent from you, an odor of a sweet smell, a sacrifice acceptable, well-pleasing to God. But my God shall supply all your need according to his riches and glory by Christ Jesus. And that is that it puts God to the test that if you have sacrificed, and they gave out of their poverty, if you have sacrificed to be a blessing and to help someone else, now the responsibility falls back on God to take care of you. I'd much rather have God, I'd much rather be the one doing the sacrificing and have God backing me up than anybody else. That's what he says. That's the context of the context of that verse of God supplying all your needs is you supplying somebody else's needs. That's exactly what happened. Sometimes we pull these verses out and we say, it's just a blanket coverage for everybody. It's not according to the context, it's not. It's according to, you're supplying the needs of missionaries. You're supplying the needs of this church and this pastor. According to this, God will supply your needs. Turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 8. claims the truth of the resurrection. It puts God to the test in your life, and it does something else. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 1 to 9, it says, "Moreover, brethren, we do you to wit of the grace of God bestowed on the churches of Macedonia, how that in a great trial of affliction and abundance of their joy," and notice this, "and their deep poverty abounded unto the riches of their liberality. For to their power I bear record, yea, and beyond their power they were willing of themselves." They'd have done more if they could have, beyond their power. "Praying us with much entreaty that we should receive the gift and take upon us the fellowship of the ministering to the saints. And this they did, not as we hoped, but first gave their own selves to the Lord, and unto us by the will of God." I mean, they were all in. Insomuch that we desired Titus that as he had begun, so he would also finish in you the same grace also. What the Macedonians had done, Titus is there in Corinth to encourage the Corinthians to do. Not because they're just trying to get something out of them, but because they had already told them that they would. He says, "Therefore, as ye abound in everything, in faith and utterance and knowledge and in all diligence, and in your love to us, see that ye abound in this grace also." Notice this, "I speak not by commandment." So I'm not up here speaking by commandment. I've never compelled anyone to give. I've never gone to anyone about giving. Now, if you're going to ask me if you're going to grow as a Christian and without giving, I'm going to tell you it's impossible. It's not even possible. You know, if all you're going to do is receive and never be on the giving end, show me where that's Christ-like. It's not. He says, "But I speak not by commandment, but by occasion of the forwardness of others," and look at this, "and to prove the sincerity of your love." That's what giving's about. "For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, that ye through his poverty might be rich." When it says there over there, what Romans 5:6, "But God committeth his love toward us," you know how he did that? He sent Jesus Christ to sacrifice himself. He sent him into poverty. He gave up everything to come here. That was the proof of the sincerity of God's love. How does God say you prove the sincerity of your love? He'll know by your giving. That's just the truth. People, I can tell you this, people give to whatever they love. They buy whatever they love. That's just human nature, okay? A spiritual nature, if you have one, if it's growing within you, will see the importance of giving to God. I do. Whatever problem I had with it as a very young Christian, I do not have it now. God is interested in voluntary giving and sacrifice. That's why it's not by commandment. It's completely voluntary. But don't think it doesn't prove the sincerity of your love. And listen, we're not talking about amount here. And don't get that in your mind. We're not talking about an amount. We're talking about a sacrifice. My giving cost me something. Does yours? Since 1990, I've had one new car. One I left over in Romania, and we just got one last year. You know what my giving cost me? It cost me a new car every year, at least. It cost me, I could have paid off my house in half the time. I could have been eating better. Cost me something. It is possible to give and not love, but it's impossible to love and not give. There are some folks that give, you know, they need a tax write-off, or they want to look good in front of their neighbors or their peers or whatever. But I don't know how you love God and not want to give to Him. I don't know that. And I said a percentage is a poor indicator to good giving when you're rich and when you're poor. There are other ways. I think someone who is vastly rich, I don't think we have anybody in here vastly rich. If you are, raise your hand. Okay. But if you were vastly rich, there's other ways you'd have to prove your sincerity to God. Some people have more money, they know what to do with it in a lifetime. I can't, I remember to aspire to be a millionaire was something. Now, if you're a millionaire, you're practically poor. I mean, they have billionaires now. What does a billionaire do with all his money besides lose it in the stock market? And what if you had $1 billion? What would you do with it? I mean, you'd have a hard time spending it all, wouldn't you? So you'd have a hard time. I mean, if you gave missions and your church and every other church you could think of, you gave them $100 million, that still leaves you $900 million. Wow, what a sacrifice. You're going to go without. You see what I mean? But you take someone that hardly makes anything. I tell poor people all the time, they say, I just can't make it. I said, well, you need to learn to give then. And they look at me like, are you insane? Give? Give? Do I look like I have a lot to give? I said, exactly. Exactly. They don't get it because they don't ever look at the scriptures. The Bible says there is that which scattereth, yet tendeth to increase. And there is that which gathereth more than meat, and it tendeth to poverty. You see, the principles that you apply, and this even works in the business world actually, but a lot of times we're trying to apply natural common sense to this thing, and it's a biblical principle. Scatter the thing. Cast thy bread upon the waters. It used to be a name for money with bread. Cast it, and after many days, what happens? It comes back. It comes back multiplied. Well, a lot of businessmen realized that and started casting their money to foreign endeavors, and it's come back. They've made money off of it. I mean, you can follow this thing. I mean, the Bible's never wrong. But there's learning how to be a good giver. And I know this. I know that let me put it to you this way. If God is the last line on your budget, then I know who's last in your life. That's why in our home, it is always the first thing that comes out, unless we forget, but we try to remember. It is the very first thing, without consideration of what has come in, what bills there might be, what broke down that month that needs to be replaced. That's why I said giving to me is the easiest thing. I don't even know what's happening. She writes the check, it just goes out. That's fine, And then whatever need I have, whatever shortcoming there is, I just pass it right back on to God. Say, there it is. Prove him with it. I've got an outstanding one. I've got some bills outstanding. I've got some things that are out there that got to be paid down, or over time I've asked God to help me just get rid of them. One of them I've made them myself because I was cheated, and I don't like to be cheated. And so that's going to go on for a while, but I'm not denying anyone their payment. I'm not denying anyone their payment. It may take them 60 years to get it, but I'm not denying anyone their payment. They know they cheated me. And so that's a little bit of something going on out there, but I've asked the Lord before I'm raptured out of here, and I'd like to go in the rapture, I don't want to owe anybody anything. And I mean nobody. I don't care if I'm leaving it all to the Antichrist. I just don't want to owe this world nothing. That's just the way I feel about it. Not everybody's going to be able to do that. Now, whether the Lord let me do it, we'll see. I mean, what if the rapture were today? I'd go out without debts. Okay, I'm willing to go. They can have everything else. Sell everything I have. They'll be able to pay them off easily. If God's not the first thing in your budget, then where does he fall? Does the family pet beat out God? I've seen situations where the pets beat out the Lord. I mean, they need, maybe they had a vet bill or whatever. Can't give this month, got a vet bill. I would never face God over that. Well, I'll move on. And you never need to be afraid that you're going to give too much. All right, look at 1 Corinthians chapter 9. So it proclaims the truth of the resurrection. It puts God to the test in your life. It proves the sincerity of your love. And the next thing is it provides for the needs of the local church. That's why in our Constitution, it's the members that we rely on to take care of the needs of the church. Faithful giving of the members. We don't require the lost to do it. We definitely don't want to take any money from the state under any circumstances. They'll get an advantage over you if you let them do that. We're not a business, so we're not trying to sell anything. I think even if we have books to sell or we have anything, we always sell it for what we paid for it. We don't try to make any money off that at all. I just feel like I know there are other churches that may do it different. That's just the way I believe it. If God wants this church to run, it'll run. That's just how I feel about it. I believe He'll provide the need, or He'll provide what's needed, and He'll take care of it. Salvation is free. Everything else costs money. Now, sometimes you have church members that somehow think that they sit in here for every Sunday and every Wednesday night, and they enjoy these cool air conditioning. I know some of you are freezing to death, but the cool air conditioner in the summertime, the furnace in the wintertime, and the lights and the food, and they think, wonderful. Yeah, well, if you're never contributing, never being a part of it, I guess it would be nice. But and there, I've had very few cases of that. You say, what do you say to them? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. That's between them and God. If the preaching doesn't correct it, if they don't see their need for it, then I've never seen anyone. What I have seen is people that do not learn to give. It just seems like a snapshot in time. They just stay the way they are. That makes sense to you? They never go anywhere up or they just stay right there. I don't know. But you got building, lights, heating, cooling, gospel tracts, cleaning supplies, landscaping, mowing equipment, and then you got this preacher here that you got to feed and take care of. But it is a symbiotic relationship. You feed off of me, and then I feed off of you. That's the way it works. Now, if I'm not feeding you, kick me out. Okay? There's many a preacher probably needs to be put to the curb for not feeding his flock. But if I feed you, look 1 Corinthians 9. This covers it. The Lord says it a lot better than I could. 1 Corinthians 9. Now, I'm not complaining, by the way. If the Lord let me have my ruthers, I would rather be independently wealthy and not take any salary at all. I'm almost embarrassed. I think I should do this for free. I'd do it for free. I've done it for free. I'd do it for free again. I really would. Every Sunday, every Wednesday night, same. And I wouldn't slight you, okay? I wouldn't just say, well, and just give you something that's standard fare. Because to me, I love doing this. I feel almost embarrassed that I take a check for something that I love to do, that I'd do for nothing. Now, I got to live, folks, but you see how skinny I'm getting. Okay. 1 Corinthians 9, look at verse 7, and we'll probably, Let me see here where I'm at. Yeah, we'll probably stop there. 1 Corinthians 9 verse 7 says, Who goeth a warfare any time at his own charges? Who planteth a vineyard, eateth not of the fruit thereof? Or who feedeth a flock, and eateth not of the milk of the flock? In other words, if you put all this labor in, if you go to warfare, well, then the what do they call it? I can't think of the word. When you pillage, not pillage, but plunder. But what do they call that? Spoils of war. That's what I was thinking of. The spoils of war. I've been watching this thing about gold from World War II. Anybody been watching that? About they found all this in the jungles of the Philippines. That high general in the Japanese army stored all this gold that they had taken, and they think they found it. And of course, they got all these environmental regulations. They got people watching them. They got helicopters flying over, trying to keep tabs on them. And so far, they have this map that shows all these different places, and they've found markers in every place. And every time they try to get into this mountain, something's happened. They couldn't do it. Cave in, they found all kinds of caves that they use, or tunnels that they've dug. And the last thing they tried was they were drilling a hole about this big, 900 feet. Now, if I'm not mistaken, isn't that 3 football fields? 900 feet? Isn't 300 feet a football field? 900 feet, that's 3 football fields. They're drilling straight into this mountain, and they're aiming for this empty spot that they saw that when they did this type of scan they've got, and they hit it. And they finished up the season finale, and they ran this camera 900 feet into this mountain, and when it came out the other side, there was this empty place. They had hit it. They didn't think they were going to make it. They had went past where they thought they had. They said, we could have veered up, we could have veered down, and missed it. They hit it. And when that camera came through there, you know what was sitting there? There were 3 boxes sitting in that open expanse place in there. And now they got to find a way to get to it. Solid rock, man, 900. Just, how I got onto all that. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah. They go into all the trouble. Should they have a right to some of it? Well, of course. Talk about the spoils of World War II. But who feedeth a flock and eateth not of the milk thereof? Who takes care of a flock doesn't partake of the milk or the meat? Say I these things as a man, or saith the law the same also? Now we find a law that he's going to apply to preachers. For it is written in the law of Moses, thou shalt not muzzle the mouth of the ox that treadeth out the corn. I don't know if I should take offense to that or not. But notice he says the mouth of the ox. Don't muzzle him that treadeth out the corn. Why? He's the one laboring in the field. Let him stop and get lunch, so that he can keep working. Doth God take care for oxen? Yeah, well, the thing there is God takes care for preachers who live of the gospel. He said, or saith he it altogether for our sakes, no doubt, this is written, that he that ploweth should plow in hope, and he that thresheth in hope should be a partaker of his hope. Now look, here's the principle. If we have sown unto you spiritual things, now if you don't think they're worth anything, then I understand. And there's some folks that don't think they're worth anything. I happen to believe they're worth a lot more than the carnal things of this world. I always have felt that way. But it says, if we have sown unto you spiritual things, is it a great thing if we shall reap your carnal things? Not really. What you get, listen, what a preacher is to give you, what a pastor is to give you is eternal. What you can give me back is temporal. It's a good trade. It really is. I've felt that all my life. There's men I can't pay back enough. There's not enough time in a day, there's not enough money in my hand to ever pay back what they did for me. And it was spiritual things, it was eternal things. It says, if others be partakers of this power over you, are not we rather? Well, let me ask you this. You've been paying DP&L? You've been paying the gas company? You've been paying your insurance, and they're not even giving you nothing until something happens. I mean, you've been paying your when you go to Kroger's, do you pay them or do you just fly out the door with the cart? Huh? Don't tell me you fly out the door with the cart. I mean, think about it. He says, others be partakers of this power over you. You pay everybody else that provides you a need, right? Nevertheless, we have not used this power, but suffer all things. I keep my mouth shut. Trust the Lord just like you do. Lest we should hinder the gospel of Christ. Do you not know that they which minister about holy things live of the holy things of the temple? That was the Old Testament model for it. If they served in the temple, they should live of the temple. Therefore, they lived of the sacrifices. They which wait at the altar are partakers with the altar. Even so hath the Lord ordained. He chose this method, that they which preach the gospel should live of the gospel. I got no problems if a guy if he can do both, if he can work a secular job. I tried it for a couple of years. It almost killed me. And the job I had was working with numbers, and I would have a head full of numbers every day. I mean, I'm talking thousands and thousands of numbers. I'm talking about calculations, and it was just, my head would become so full that I couldn't think. And I would get to the church, and I couldn't remember anybody's name in front of me. I couldn't remember. I mean, I was forgetting my kids' names because my brain was just being taken up with it. And I don't have a big brain, I have a small brain, and it can only handle so much. And after about 2 years, I said, man, I either go full time or I'm going to have to quit the ministry because I can't do this. And then I went full time. The Lord provided a way and been full time ever since. Now, I can do a lot. I've done jobs on the side, but the jobs I've done since then, I've not had to do much thinking. You get one that's got mental processes involved in it, and then all of a sudden you got to empty that and go to this. It's not that easy. At least it's not easy for me. But if, like I said, if a preacher's independently wealthy and doesn't want to take a salary, I don't think he should. I think he should donate it to missions or whatever. It doesn't stop your obligation for giving, but it kind of, I don't think he should take it if he doesn't need it. That's just my own point of view. If the Lord ever puts me in that situation, I won't take it. Paul applies the law of the Old Testament to a preacher of the New. So you have examples back of the Old Testament. He applies it to the New Testament. You should be giving first to the church that is feeding you, then missionaries. And the reason I say that is this. God is a God of order. And he just said that it's no great thing if somebody ministers to you spiritual things and you minister to them carnal things. Well, where are you fed? You're fed here. At least I hope you are. Your first obligation ought to be to hear, then everything else. I encourage taking on missionaries, but not before you've learned to give to the church and meet the needs of the church. Because all you've done is get something out of sync and out of order. God's not going to bless that. By principles that are laid down in the Scriptures, start with your local church first, and then missions, then someplace else, whatever you want to give to. But that's the order that's given to us here. So I'm going to stop there. Is there any questions about what I covered? I got about 4 more things that deal with why it's important. And then we'll get into principles of giving, and then you won't have to worry about it for 5 more years, hopefully. Any questions about what we covered?